11 million seconds in like a month or something. But like when you equate the seconds to like how long a million seconds is compared to how long a trillion seconds is, it's like 11,000 years or something for a trillion seconds, as opposed to like a million seconds, which might be like a year or something like that. I don't know the exact math, but someone can probably do that. But it just goes to show how much like 1 trillion actually is. It's hard for the human mind to really comprehend how much a fucking trillion is. Excuse my language. But when you just talk about pumping trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars out there into the economy with no backing, literally, the US dollar has, or any dollar, any fiat currency, fiat literally means by decree, meaning I say it has value, so it has value. So fiat currency pumping trillions of it in, inflating, what do they think's going to happen? You know, so it's like it's mind-boggling how much fiat that they pumped into the system. And it's not like they printed it; they just made the zeros and ones go up in people's bank accounts. Yeah, some people got checks, most people got direct deposits and things like that, and just other ways to inject the liquidity into the ecosystem. But it just was unbalanced. It's not a balanced shift. It's so heavy on the fiat side with no value on the other side of the pool. It's kind of like we're experiencing impermanent loss right now, almost.
Yeah, I'm looking at the USDebtClock.org. I put it in the chat. It's it's crazy. There's more student loan debt than there is credit card debt. So that's like no hope. Like we're not learning to manage anything. You know, it's like just total spending without any limits, and they just do it whenever they want. It's no discipline.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So I'm in the process of doing that math right now. So there's 31,536 seconds in a year. Let's call it 31 million seconds in a year. So if you wanted to figure out, if you had 1 trillion seconds, how many years is that? Divided by 31, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equals, that can't be. Fuck. It's like 32,000 years. Is that right? That can't be. I'm looking through the chat now. I don't recognize a lot of people. I see some people I know. I know Tiger. Tiger's a big math guy. If you want to help me out with these equations, I'd appreciate it. Postmeister, what's happening, bro? Steak and bake. What's going on?
Both presidents that issued money without being backed by treasury notes were both murdered. President Lincoln and President Kennedy. One called it greenbacks, and the other called it silver certificates. Ever since then, no one has tried.
Yeah. Wow, that's an incredible fact, man. And yeah, I just verified the math again if I'm wrong, but um 31 million seconds in a year, and if one if you had 1 trillion seconds, it would take you 32,000 years to it's just 32,000 years. So that's how much a trillion actually is. 32,000 years worth of seconds.
Yeah, it really means like absolutely means nothing to them. Honestly, it's like it's limitless. It's like just keep doing it until it breaks. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't matter. Like if they try to issue like greenbacks or silver certificates that really were backed with anything, they get murdered. That's what happens.
Because it doesn't fit the narrative of the less than 1% that controls everything. It, what's that debt clock at? What is the debt?
It is total debt $91 trillion.
Jesus, for real? $91 trillion? Holy
I
shit.
mean, what's that? Let me see. One, two, three, four, four, four commas. No, five commas. That's a trillion, right? One, two, three, four. Four commas is a trillion, right?
So 12 zeros and a number would be so 13 numbers would be 1 trillion. So it could be 91 trillion.
91
Sure.
children. 91 trillion 662 billion 430. It just turned to 30 million.
So I want to figure out how much we have to pay back per second
The,
to
the average family saves only $12,000, or has that's the average savings.
so again, somebody check my math on this. I'm giving you roundabouts right now. At a $91 trillion debt, we have to pay back $2 billion a second for 32 years straight. 32,000 years straight to pay off $91 trillion in debt. I hope my math is wrong. I hope I'm like messing a zero up somewhere because that number is just not definitely not realistic. But I checked it twice and it seems to pan out. So again, if you're paying $2 billion for every second, 2 billion with a B dollars a second, it's going to take you 32,000 years to pay off the existing debt of $91 trillion, and without another penny being added on top of that. Hey, so when did they lift the muting restriction? When you first joined in, you'd be muted and have to wait for somebody to unmute you. When did that change back?
I suppose when it didn't matter anymore.
Hey, notice that no one's muted anymore. But when did this change?
It's a good question, Tiger. I was just asking that. Hey, Tiger, you're a math guy. Did you hear my recent calculations about seconds compared to trillions?
Okay, what are you trying to calculate?
So I was trying to show how big a trillion was, and it doing some rudimentary math just on my iPhone that I have to turn sideways to get the number right. And my eyes really aren't the best, but first I wanted to figure out how many seconds, h- how many years was a trillion seconds, and then at a debt of $91 trillion, how long would it take to pay that debt off, and how much would it take to pay that debt off per second? So I came up with 32,000 years worth of seconds in a trillion, right? And then if you were paying $2 billion per second, it would take 32,000 years to pay off a $91 trillion debt.
So the debt right now is 91 trillion.
Ish. It's going up by the second.
The rate, the payback rate was 2 billion per second.
Correct. How many years would that take?
I'm actually getting, if the rate is 2 billion per second, I'm actually getting about 12 and a half hours, 12.63 hours.
Yeah, it's a big difference than what I had. I'd like to work out the equation to see where I went so wrong. So there's about 31 million seconds in a year, correct?
Sorry, I was in the middle of calculation. If you did 2 million per second, that would take about 526 days to pay off the debt.
Yeah, even though I was way off, that's still a lot of money and a lot of time at $2 million a second.
That debt isn't getting paid off. The changes the government would have to make to pay off a debt like that would, no government would make it, because the nature of politics is you're trying to be reelected. I think, also, I think in the U.S., um, the U.S. really is controlled by corporations, not necessarily the government.
Yeah, that's true. Especially with rates going up, continuing to climb, you get even tougher to pay that off. I mean, and it doesn't have to get paid off. It's not like, a dire need. It was just to illustrate how much a trillion actually is, and the fact that they're just throwing trillions around like it's nothing to inflate the dollar or any fiat currency for that matter.
We gotta
Well,
go.
it, it had.
We gotta go back to the tally sticks.
What I want you to do, go watch a video on YouTube, the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio, and that will sum up what's going to happen in the future.
I know you can't post a link in the chat, but do you mind throwing that to me in a DM?
Sure, one second.
Again, as I said before, my eyes really aren't that
You
good.
might
Trying to
you
use this
might get
platform is not easy.
away with it. There's no there's no moderators anymore.
I'll post in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I know where some of the guys went, but nobody's nobody's monitoring what's going on.
Okay, just posted it. What he did was he went back centuries through history and looked at all of the different monetary policies and currencies that rose and fell that were world currencies. And he saw the trends that led to them falling. And basically, the US dollar is kind of on the tipping point right now.
Yeah, thanks for posting that, bro. I just saved it, and then I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, if history repeats itself and if his analysis is correct, maybe in 20 years or so, the, the Chinese currency will actually be the world currency.
I mean, I can see that. It's unfortunate, but definitely can see that.
Yeah, I saw that. I watched that before. It's interesting, but it's well known. You know, no one stays in power forever.
The thing is, the countries and organizations that lose power is normally internal. The reason why they lose power, not necessarily external.
Yeah, and I think it all stems from greed. There has to be a level at which the human is dissatisfied, but for some reason, at that level of power, just doesn't stop, and the greed doesn't stop, and it just takes over and consumes the individual, which consumes the whole system.
I mean, the whole reason for the United States was like separation of church and state, and then to have representation without taxation, taxation without representation, and no central bank. And we're back to the central bank.
We're back to
That's
the
that,
essential centralized everything.
yeah. We're trying to get away from England. Everyone who left England was trying to get away from the central bank of England. That's what the Revolutionary War was about. Now we're back to the world. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the IMF, Council on Foreign Relations, so forth.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Some centralization is good. Like, as like a centralized supermarket is good. I don't want to have to go out and hunt a dinner every night and have my wife skin it. That's just not for me. I will if I have to, but if I don't have to, I don't want to. So fine, give me a centralized supermarket. Cool. But centralized banking, I mean, it just leaves so much room for corruption and greed and all those other negative externalities that exist when you're dealing with human nature.
That's what crypto was supposed to be. It's supposed to be a way for us to remove the middleman from the money. But it looks like the experiment is starting to fail.
Yeah, I think that's because we have to, as a society, be able to accept crypto as a value in the physical world that we occupy. Like if you need some goods and services, um, being able to transact in crypto for those goods and services, that decentralization. But like right now, you can't really go to your supermarket and buy bread, eggs, and milk, uh, with Hex or with Pulse or PulseX or Bitcoin or Ethereum. You just can't do it. Maybe Bitcoin in El Salvador, but if you're here in the United States, it's kind of difficult to do.
It's common though.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is. There's
So,
a lot of exciting things on the horizon.
so the crypto market is in the adoption phase right now. I think this is gonna last for about 10 to 15 years. After the market gets saturated enough, then um, it will become more mainstream. At that point, you'll be able to use crypto to purchase goods and services like a credit card. But I think we may be 10 to 15 years from that point. Right now, we're in the adoption phase. So, what's going to happen? There's going to be a lot of people that make money from crypto. There's going to be a lot of people that lose money from crypto. But the during this adoption phase, the persons that make a lot of money from crypto are going to draw more people to come to the crypto market. And once enough people are into crypto, then it becomes saturated. Then we move into that next phase where we start to use it for transactions.
Yeah, and I think there are some technical limitations with crypto, and the whole privacy fact when it comes to transacting. Like, just if you didn't, mix your transactions in like Monero or Tornado Cash or one of those other protocols, and you just like went to the whatever, the grocery store or the auto shop or whatever. You just want to say, here's my MetaMask wallet. I want to pay for my brake service in crypto, and they, okay, fine. I'll take your whatever token, your Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hex, whatever. If somebody's savvy enough, they can, or not even savvy, half savvy, just knowing about blockchain, they can look into your wallet and see what you have. And just putting a face with a wallet is not a good thing. It opens you up to the wrench attack, right? So there has to be a logistically practical way to privatize those transactions.
I don't think that'll be possible. I think cryptocurrency will be centralized, and it's happening right now. I think the last time I checked, there's 43 CBDCs being created. So eventually, what I see happening, the market is going to become saturated. It's going to be heavily regulated, and the days of 100 to 1,000 coins being created per day will be gone. There will be, I think, along with the CBDCs, there'll be a handful of coins that will stand up against the regulation. I think right now for most created, I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are definitely two of them. But I see heavy regulation coming, and that's going to kill out a lot of the altcoins. But
I agree.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree. Some, but not all. There still will be that need for the opposite side of the coin. Pun intended. And decentralization, centralization. But I agree, it will knock a whole lot of people. And there does need to be some regulation. Like the shit that BlackRock and Citadel did with Terra Luna, that is straight criminal, gangster. Those motherfuckers should be in jail. Everyone involved in that bullshit that made people lose billions of dollars. Fuck them. Part of my language, right? There does need to be some regulation, not for normal guys like me and you, but for those crazy corrupt gangsters all the way at the top.
If you notice, just about every stablecoin has been tested in this bear market. There's been a coordinated attack against stablecoins. Even Tether, it stood so far, but it has been attacked. USDC has been attacked. So there has been a coordinated attack against stablecoins. But what's going to happen, although there will still be some decentralization with cryptocurrency, it's the same issue we have today. You cannot exist just in DeFi. You need to convert your crypto to fiat at some point to be able to use it in the real world. And so at that point in time, you will need to do the same thing. The cryptocurrencies that are centralized and that are regulated will be the ones you need to convert your crypto to use it in the real world. So you will almost be forced to use certain cryptocurrencies if you want to transact uh, to buy goods and services.
Yeah, there's already point of sale technology. I think the technology is called Flexa, where it does integrate your crypto with brick and mortars. There's some Starbucks that take it, some Chipotle's that accept it. So it's kind of like a credit card, you know, receiver, like they have any point of sale establishment that you go to in the 21st century. But it does accept crypto. Now, I think technology like Flexa will be more abundant in the future. But you're right, it does take a little while to adopt, and there is some uncertainty with the CBDCs. There is a lot of questions that need to be answered, and those questions will be answered in the next coming years. And I think a decade is a good estimate But there is technology that's coming out in our near future. Again, we can't talk about third parties. I get that. It's pinned at the top. I'm not trying to, but there are things that people are working on to fix these problems that we're having right now. And it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And I think you're right. You know, the mass adoption could be a decade plus away, but the technology is going to be in front of your face and in your hands before you know it.
I'm looking at Bitcoin right now. This thing is coming down. Market is coming down.
When do you think it's going to touch 14?
Could be between the way it's looking right now. It could be within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
And where do you see ETH at that same time?
Well, I'll tell you right now, if Bitcoin drops to 14,000, it would be an 80% drop. ETH drop to
Bro, you got a lot of background.
ETH should drop to about 550.
Yeah, again, not to talk about third party projects, but you know, I'd love to pick up some gas pretty cheap. I mean, cheap and relatively speaking, so to speak.
Yeah, if all at that point, all altcoins should be down 90 to 95%.
And where do you see Hex?
X may drop to 2.5 cents. There's a lot of people waiting on 1.5 cents, but with the limit orders set, I don't know if it's going to reach that point.
Yeah, it's a nice buy wall down there, right?
Yeah, I have a feeling there's a lot of people who are going to buy at about 2 cents.
I mean, I'm definitely buying in the twos. I ain't telling you guys exactly where, but I definitely am buying in the twos. Oh, if it drops to the ones, you bet your ass I'm buying.
I think the only way it drops below 2 cents is if Bitcoin goes to 10K.
Which, I mean, first of all, I could see that happening. And if it does, Richard Hart called it a long time ago where everybody thought he was absolutely nuts for calling 10K bottom. Right. And if that shit actually hits, it just adds to the story. Just adds to the thing. This guy just makes great calls.
So he I noticed that he uses the 4-year Bitcoin cycle. That is pretty accurate so far. Every so the eh, before the year before the halving, the Bitcoin halving, it normally peaks at the top, and then every 4 years, 2014, 2018, and now 2022, we experienced a bear market and the bottoms out. Now, the only thing why I'm gonna watch the $14,000 level is because the amount that Bitcoin dipped every year is diminishing, or every bear market is diminishing. The first bear market it dipped 87%. The second bear market it dipped 84%. If the pattern holds true, Bitcoin should dip about 80% this bear market, which would be about 14,000, right at about 14,000. Now it could break that and dip lower, but if the pattern holds true, it should bottom out at about 14. But it's possible it could push through that and we could go all the way to 10. But if we follow this cycle, it'll bottom out sometime between now and November. We're gonna top out the first quarter in 2025, and then 2026 will be the next bear market.
I remember Richard mentioning that Mount Gox hack guys are at some point going to get their Bitcoin back. They ever get their? They ever release it?
It's a great question. I don't know.
Yeah, because from Mount Gox to now, man, that's a huge gain. I could see, like, if I was one of those guys, I'd definitely, if I had some Bitcoin coming.
Oh, 100%. Do you know the total amount of Bitcoin? How much is being released?
I forgot what he said. There is a number though.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it too, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. But you're right, that is something that needs to be factored into these decisions. I mean, you know, if it's, 5, 6 figures Bitcoin, that's a big impact. So what are some people in here doing when Bitcoin? I mean, when Hex drops under 3 cents? Let's say Richard Hart is right, and of course that's going to be the next. That's great publicity. Look, fuck it. We got video months ago when Bitcoin was 50,000 and he was calling 10,000 Bitcoin. That's a great publicity for him, for us in the community. But again, so if that happens and Hex drops down below 3 cents, and then this publicity kind of puts new life into it, you don't think it can go back to 4.5, 5 cents, 6 cents, 7 cents? Maybe a quick triple up, double up?
Well, it's definitely gonna go back up. For me personally, I'm holding out for Pulsechain. Yeah, it's sacked and everything, but I'm ready to buy some more PulseX, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because because one of the things that I regretted not doing is in the beginning, when it first came out, I regretted not, DCAing, you know. So this time around, I'm definitely going to be DCAing on a new chain. I'm DCAing now. I'm actually waiting for my limit orders never came through. Somehow it for me, I might get some more.
Yeah, for right now, it's like, stack dry powder. Take it to, buy those red candles. The bigger those red candles, if you believe in the project, the heavier you buy.
I
And
I just want this to drop to 11K so that we can launch. Now there's a lot of speculation, but some things that I've heard, I think it's finished. I think it's finished and we're waiting for the bottom.
I can see that. That would be pretty cool. I think that'd be a good strategy. And if 11 is the bottom, they're calling the bottom at 11 and it launches.
So
Great.
you're saying when Pulsechain launches, buy some Bitcoin too, right? Be the bottom.
Buy whatever you want to buy. Me personally, I like the recent updates of. Oh, I don't think we could talk about it, but I like the recent updates of Ada. So I'm probably gonna buy some of that. Um, I think that's gonna do very well in the next bull market. But yeah, at that point, everything should be down 90 to 95%. So
Yeah, thanks for the analysis, Tiger. I've heard you before. I know you're pretty accurate, and what you're saying makes sense. Appreciate you breaking it down for us tonight.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Waiting for 11K so you can launch. I mean, that seems rational. Doesn't want to launch without the bottom being in.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense from one aspect. It does, and then there's other. But yeah, you've heard him say. At least I've heard him say that we're gonna launch when we're ready. Like the market doesn't matter. But I mean, maybe he sees more benefit to it because it's so close, right? It's like right around the corner of the bottom. We're not talking about years away. We're talking about weeks, right? If not a couple months away from the bottom. Why not wait at this point?
it makes a lot of sense. If he launched mid-May, like he first said he was going to do, it would have appreciated in price. But what is going to happen on launch day if he launches from the bottom? The thing is going to take off like a rocket ship. And the major dip that we would have experienced 1 to 2 months after that mid-May launch, we may not experience that. We will experience some dips, but it won't be like we would have experienced with Bitcoin dropping all the way down from 31K to 10K. So he did the smartest thing for the project. I know it's probably a lot of people were counting on this to launch by a certain time, but he really did what was in the best interest of the project.
I agree.
Yeah, plus Plus, it matches his narrative that he's called the bottom, called the top. So if he wants to be accurate, then it will be part of his narrative, and it'll match, and everybody will be on board.
Yeah, this dude's gonna go down as a legend.
I mean, even if you want launched in September, if it takes that long for the bottom, so be it.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have experienced a launch before, but that is probably the craziest event you'll ever experience in crypto. My advice to people is do nothing. Don't do anything at launch. If you sacrifice, the only persons who are probably going to benefit doing anything at the launch are those who sacrifice for Pulse, because they're going to get everything on a big discount. They're probably going to be able to swap Pulse for PulseX at 10 to 1 or better. They're going to be able to have a crazy ratio between Pulse and PHEX. So they are probably the only ones who I would recommend to do any type of swapping or trading. If you only have PulseX, just on it. If you have fiat, I would wait for the first dip. I would probably wait for the first dip before I buy.
What'd you say about PulseX? Just stake it? What'd you say?
If you only sacrifice for PulseX and not Pulse, just sit on your hands. You're gonna mess yourself up, because I know a lot of people are gonna FOMO into Pulse day one launch, because they feel like they need to get some Pulse and they need to get it right now. But the ratios are gonna be so crazy. You're basically gonna be giving away PulseX at insane ratios. You're gonna be trading 10 PulseX for one Pulse, which is crazy. So I would advise people just to sit on your hands at the beginning and wait for the ratios. Probably 1 to 3 months after launch, the ratios will be a lot better. So you'll be able to get it. If you want Pulse, you'll be able to get a much better rate on Pulse. But most people won't do that. From launch, everyone is going to FOMO into Pulse. They're going to trade their Pulse X 10 to 1, 15 to 1 for they're going to trade their Pulse X 10 to 1, 15 to 1 for Pulse, and later on they're going to regret that. But the ones who sit on their hands and do nothing will be the ones who will see the most benefit.
Well, that sounds good for people with Pulse. And if you have Pulse and you swap it for PulseX at 10 to 1, you're going to be in a good position.
Yeah, the people who are Pulse, they really control everything right now, because everybody wants Pulse because of the narrative around it that it's going to do a lot better than Pulse X. So because of that, at launch, everyone is going to FOMO into Pulse.
I think a lot of the narrative was DCAing in. I think a lot of people wish they would DCA out, because you never know where the market's going.
That dip's gonna happen pretty quick. We'll see a little bit of gains, you know.
The
If
dip,
you would have sold Hex at 30 cents and bought it back now at whatever it is, 4 cents or whatever it is, you It doesn't matter if you waited till 1 cent.
So the dip always happens. It always happens. Ethereum launch at $2.83. It dipped to 43 cents. So those who would have bought immediately after launch would have experienced about an 80 to 85% dip. Cardano launched at 3 cents. It dipped to about 2 cents. Polkadot launched at $2.94, dipped to about $2.70. Solana launched at 95 cents, dipped to about 50 cents. Avalanche launched at $5.28. It dipped to about $2.80. So basically, what I'm saying is that every one of these dip, and the dip normally happens about a month after launch. It doesn't happen immediately at launch, because at launch everyone is FOMOing and everyone is trying to buy as much as possible because they fear the price getting away from them. But a month after launch is when you would normally see that big dip, and it dips below the launch price, not necessarily the ICO price, because a lot of these never return to the original ICO price, but all of them dipped under the launch price about a month or two after launch.
So do you think it will dip below the sacrifice price for
If it won't happen for Pulse, it depends on how much people swap their PulseX for Pulse after the bridge. Um, it's possible it happens with PulseX. It definitely won't happen with Pulse, but it's possible it happens with PulseX. Honestly, if I was to say go by my gut feeling, I feel like even with people swapping large amounts of PulseX with Pulse, we still won't see it dip to sacrifice price. The lowest we may see is it may dip to 3 to 5 times the sacrifice price, and that would be the all-time low for PulseX.
What's your starting price prediction for Pulse?
I think he's going to start around the, approximately around the sacrifice price for a number of reasons. I don't think he can start much lower than that for um, he doesn't want there being a negative narrative around the launch. And if it launches below the sacrifice price, there's going to be a lot of people who feel like they shouldn't have sacrificed, that they were, although the price is going to appreciate, they will still feel negatively about the launch price being far below the sacrifice price. I don't think he is going to launch it far above the sacrifice price because he wants that price appreciation. He wants to say it did 500x, 1000x, 10,000x. He wants that narrative. So I think it's going to be, it may not be exactly the sacrifice price, but it's going to be close.
when would you, as an investor, take profits?
Well, that's the toughest part about investments. It's easy to find a good quality asset to invest in. It's easy to pick a good entry because you're going by percentages. You can easily say, okay, this thing is down 90%. This is a good time to enter. The hardest thing is when to exit. How high is this thing going to go? Is it going to go up 1,000% from its low? Is it going to go up 10,000% from its low? There's no way of telling how high something can go. What I would advise you to do, I have my selling point I won't necessarily say what that is, but what I would tell you to do is pick a point where you can sell and not regret it going up more. So, for instance, this thing may go up 10,000x, like everyone says, but you may have your selling point that may be 1,000x, and if your selling point is 1,000x and you sell 1,000x, you have delivered that and be happy with that, regardless of what it does after that. So I would say have your points. I think a smart way to do it too is to have the scale out of your position. So you may sell 5% at 100x, you may sell another 10% at 500x, sell another 10 at 1,000x, and you may have selling points at each particular milestone. So
So basically DCA out.
yes, that's a good way to do it, especially when it's the asset is very unpredictable. You don't really know how well it's going to do. DCAing out is sometimes the best thing to do. That way, you still get to catch uh, certain highs in case it dips down. Because at each point, psychologically, people will exit the market. Once we hit, believe it or not, there are people who are going to sell their Pulse and PulseX once we hit 5x. Once we hit 5x, there'll be people selling. Once we hit 10x, there'll be people selling. Once we hit 20x, 50x, 100x. So if you sell, let's say 5% at 100x, there may be a large number of people who are just waiting on 100x to sell. So this, it may dip 80%. So if you want, you could take that 5% and buy back, buy the dip, and that would actually, let me see how much that would get you. That would get you about, I think about 25%. So you would have 25% more than your original amount of Pulse or PulseX. So that's just an example, but I would, I think scaling out of your position is a wise thing to do, especially if you really have no clue how well this thing is going to do.
Especially in this bear market. Let's say for example, let's make some imaginary numbers. You had 10,000 in PulseX and you did 100x. That's $1,000,000, right? So now you want to get back your original investment. So you DCA out 50% of your position. So you get 500,000 out, and then you still have your 500,000 in. That sounds like something reasonable.
Yeah, me personally, I think that's a bit too much at that at 100x, because with assets like Pulse and PulseX, I think it's very reasonable within a couple of years for these to do 1,000x. So I mean, to each his own. You just have to pick a point that if it goes up more, you won't regret it because you're satisfied with what you got. That's like Ethereum.
Uh,
Ethereum's Ethereum's ICO price was 35 cents per token. The all-time high was about, I think, about 4,800, about that. So there are people who sold Ethereum, who bought the ICO, who sold Ethereum at $30, $35. They got 100x, and they felt good about it at the time until it did another, it did another 100x. So uh, there are probably some
you
people with a lot of regrets.
you
So
could
you have to kind.
always go back, catch another dip, and go back in. You don't have to.
So
It doesn't have to be the end of the story.
so let me tell you why psychologically that is difficult. That's the most difficult thing you can ever do. If you bought Ethereum, I'm just using Ethereum as an example. If you bought Ethereum at 35 cents, when Ethereum goes to $50, you're looking from the future $50 Ethereum is a steal of a deal. But to someone who bought it at 35 cents, they're like, no way, that is way too expensive. There's no way I'm buying something that I just paid 35 cents for. There's no way I'm gonna pay $50 per token. That is very tough mentally to be in that position. And although looking towards the future, that may be the right decision, but mentally, because you got it so cheap, it's hard for you to now go and buy something at 100 to 150x the price that you paid.
That's a good point, Tiger.
That's one of the
It's
most
true.
difficult
It's
things.
true. It's true, but it still might be the right thing to do. You know, like you just gotta, especially if you made back your original investment and you still say you're in USDC and you still have it liquid and you could put it right back. It dipped
And
a little bit, you put it back.
That's that's
if
a
if
discipline, but it's easier said than done,
if
right?
you have the ability to do that, you are in the 1% of investors. 99% of investors psychologically would not be able to do it.
Dips are good for getting more people on board. If if you're on the sidelines. Remember when Ethereum dropped to 150? I was paying that amount for Litecoin. I said, "Oh shit, let me get some Ethereum." But yeah, to your point, easier said than done.
That's like that's like imagine people who bought Hex at three zeros and a one. Although a 3 cent Hex is a big discount to you, to someone who bought Hex at three zeros and a one, it's mentally difficult to now buy Hex at that level because you got it so cheap.
It's all perspective, man. You gotta have a perspective about where you are and where it's gonna go.
The best thing to do um, really is to scale out small amounts um, and just hold over a long period of time. If you believe in the project, if you believe that this project is going to be around, that it has uh, product market fit, and you believe that this is going to be around 5 plus years, the best thing you can do is just hold to
See,
get to
see,
get.
if that's, I mean, some people have life needs. You know what I'm saying? Like they have things they have to do, have to pay for certain things. Like that sounds good. Like you said, but there's not a lot of people. You know, it's a rich man's game. It's a whale's game. So if you can get if you didn't have, say, it was your last 10 grand and you put it in PulseX and you can get your 10 grand out and still have 90 grand in it still. You
But
want to take out, like you said, take out that 10% that was your original investment.
that's exactly what I was saying. Because look at it this way: if you put in 10 grand into PulseX and you were a day one sacrificer at 100x, that's $1 million. Do you really need to take out 500,000 at 100x? I'm pretty sure 100,000 would hold you over for a while. So I would advise to just take out small amounts. That way, you still able to meet your daily expenses and whatever else you have going on. But at the same time, you won't regret not letting the majority of your investment ride up to higher excess.
Right. If we learn from
Yeah,
the past,
yeah.
everything will dip. So if you used to, like with Hex, when Hex went up to 55 cents, at that point, maybe 50% of your bag should be out. You have a real nice profit margin. Then you hold on to half. Because don't forget, the one thing about PulseX and Pulse is just deflationary. So every time it like moves, a little bit is just gonna disappear. So you're right. Take your gain. Don't be afraid to take some gains. Like everybody says, hold forever. Diamond hand, it's great. But yeah, you might be in this for the tech, but you should make a little money at it too. So pull out some gains, right? And if you could do it at the top, like some of the experienced guys do, good for you. But you don't have to hit the top exactly or hit the bottom exactly.
And then what you just talked about, that's getting to the highest level of investing. See, holding is for the majority of people who don't have the discipline to exit and enter the market at the right time. As we know, Richard Hart calls the tops and the bottoms. Do you think he holds, let's say, for instance, he holds Bitcoin or Ethereum? Do you think he would call the top on Bitcoin and just hold Bitcoin? I'm sure he would have taken some off the top because he knows it's going to bottom and he's going to be able to get it a lot cheaper. So at that high level, once you're able to analyze the market cycles and you know when the general top is and when the general bottom is, then you get to that level where you're exiting at the top and then going back to buy the bottom. So but that is something that requires a lot of discipline. And most people can't buy the bottom and sell the top and repeat that cycle.
So back to what you were saying, it was very interesting what you were saying about Bitcoin halving and finding the bottom and finding the top, just like we're talking about. So by your estimates and by Richard's estimates, the bottom when is it in the cycle of the Bitcoin cycle? Where are we
So,
now?
so from the past, what happens is the year before the, sorry, about 2 years before the Bitcoin halving, we normally have a bear market and it bottoms out. And 1 year after the halving is where we have the top. So there was the 2016 halving. We know that 2 years prior to that, in 2014, we had a bear market, we bottomed. And then 1 year after the 2016 halving, we hit the top in 2017. Then we look at the 2020 halving. We know that in 2018 we bottomed, 2 years prior to the halving, and then 1 year after the halving, we hit the top in 2021. So now we have the halving coming up in 2024, and it's repeating the same cycle. 2 years prior to the 2024 halving, 2022, we're about to hit the bottom. And if the cycle plays out how it's been playing out so far, 1 year after the 2024 halving will be the top, which would be 2025. So if you study these cycles and you understand when the tops and bottom will be, that allows you to
Quick
exit the
question.
market.
What part of 2025?
Well, that could vary. You, at that point in time, would have to make a determination. And for me, I do a little bit of technical analysis. So I use that once I see the weekly chart stall out at the top, I know it's time to exit. But really, you don't have to catch the exact top. By 2020, 2 to 3 months into 2025, it will be very near the top. So you don't really have to catch the exact top, but you just know that this particular year it will top out, and this particular year it will bottom out.
I just set my alarm clock for 2025. February 2025.
This is a cycle that has been playing out with consistency so far. Eventually, the cycle will be broken. Cycles always break, but so far, this is probably the most reliable indication on when the tops and bottoms will be.
This will be an interesting one with the popularity of DeFi and the explosion of the advancements in DeFi. Might be a little different this time.
Those same players, as long as they're the same players, the markets are moved by the whales and the institutions, and they always do the same thing. Their goal is to move the market while having retail investors on the opposite side of their movements. So all of what happens in between the top and the bottom is to try and get the retail trader or the retail investor to buy when they're selling and to sell when they're buying.
Yeah, and to your point, that's getting tighter and tighter.
That is getting more difficult for them to do. So at some point, they're going to shake things up and just do something that never happened in the market.
With all these lending platforms losing their ass and loans and all this kind of stuff, should have an effect on it. And one of the things about Pulsechain that's going to be Hex is visible. Like you could see when people's stakes are coming out, and the psychological aspect was more visible than other products.
Yeah, that is another positive of Hex too. It's the immutable, transparent code. It can't be changed, and you can see what everybody's doing. There's multiple front ends. It's decentralized. Well, there is a centralized portion of it, but for the most part, the code itself and the way it operates, it's awesome.
Hex and EHEX and PHEX for me are the biggest mystery in this whole ecosystem. That is the only thing I really cannot account for how it's going to perform once launch happens. Are people going to be trading their EHEX for Pulse and PulseX? Will people be trading their PHEX for Pulse and PulseX? Will people use the opportunity to buy a cheap EHEX and a cheap PHEX? It's really impossible to tell. So we really don't know what's going to happen with EHEX and PHEX. Are people going to keep their EHEX, but because they received a free PHEX, psychologically, they may not see it as valuable, so they may exchange that for Pulse and PulseX. Well, people, because PHEX it will be cheaper and it's on a new chain made by Richard Hart, will they gravitate from EHEX to PHEX? There's so much variables. It's really hard to tell what exactly is going to happen.
I think a lot of people will use Hex, especially PHEX, as kind of like almost like a stable coin. Like take their profits from Pulse into PHEX. But there's no way to tell, like you said, till it happens.
Yeah, and Tiger, I think the answer to your question, to all your questions, are yes and no. Right? There'll be people doing all kinds of stuff, everything, and some people will be doing nothing. So you're right; it's very hard to account for because there's so many more options.
The most important thing, though, what are the whales doing? Because they're the ones who move the price. Whatever the whales do will be what will be um, the prominent move in these assets. Are the whales going to stick with EHEX? Are they going to shift to PHEX? Are they just going to buy both because they're going to be cheap? What are the whales going to be doing at this time?
Well, the whales love the steak and scrapes, so they're going to try to accumulate as much EHEX as possible in the beginning if it's cheap. They're going to be in accumulation mode, I think, right in the beginning. And even on the EHEX side too. I mean, shit, you're talking about a buy wall set of a cent and a half. There's a reason for that. And there's that cliff that drops off down to the next level, sub penny. And then, who knows what happens there.
especially on the EX side for sure.
Yep.
Personally, I'm waiting for that time, that day, thinking that people are gonna, sell off once the duplication happens.
Yeah, didn't really hear what you said, man. When if you could repeat that, I heard some background noise, but
Yeah, sorry about that. I was saying that speculating that people are gonna, dump their EHEX when the fork happens. You know, I'm looking to buy some of that EHEX at a cheap price. I mean, it's cheap now compared to the all-time high, but
right, again, even though we all believe and we think that Hex on Pulse will be more popular, which probably will be, but there's still a whole ecosystem of Ethereum out there. I mean, just because Pulse Chain launches doesn't mean Ethereum goes bye-bye. And there is real economic energy locked up in smart contracts uh, for Hex on the Ethereum side, billions of dollars worth of value in Hex, right? So anybody who has any of that value locked up on the Ethereum side has motivation to try to draw in some of that other value from Ethereum, right? So I, I don't see EHEX completely dying after the launch.
I believe those who own EHEX and PX who need to be patient because if most of your bag is in Hex, you're going to watch the launch of Pulsechain and PulseX. You're going to see them take off, and you're going to see them do possibly hundreds of X's in a short period of time. And I don't think Hex is going to perform anywhere near to that. But what's eventually going to happen within a few years, that money from Pulsechain and PulseX is going to flow back into Hex. But I think it's going to take a couple of years for that to happen. But in the meantime, I think persons who aren't patient are going to sell their Hex too early.
No, that's a good point. It's a really good point. And like, just like any investment, I don't recommend, again, not financial advice, but just common sense advice. Don't go in 100% really on anything because there's opportunity costs that exist to other opportunities that you're getting, right? So you always go in responsibly with a portion of your bag. With that said, you buy the red candles, right? So if you see an opportunity on the Ethereum side of Hex is cheap, and you just hold on to it and just put it in your wallet, and you're not expecting anything for a couple of years. Like Tiger said, if you have patience, you look at the long game, and all of a sudden, boom, one day it hits, and it's like wow, it's back in action. You get all this liquid Hex, and now you can stake and scrape. You scrape all that new liquidity that just came in. Right? You guys, I don't know if you follow the Hex whale bot, but you see those 80 million Hex staked for 35 days and you're like 2,500 T shares and you do the math real quick. Like, fuck, they just built off another 10 grand, 15 grand. Good for them, But I think that's kind of the opportunity that is prevalent with the product also, but not everybody can do it, right? You have to accumulate a lot of hex to be able to do that. So it does kind of balance out. And as the T-share rate ratchets up, it gets more and more difficult to do that. Every time a stake ends, that T-share rate ratchets up, right? So it really is a crazy, ingenious protocol that has elements of every aspect, and it does work. The more people to get in, right? Especially if everybody ships it out there for a Quattro Cinco. Like, again, not a big portion of it, but even just a little bit. We're out 500 hex for 15 years. And if it's there when you go to claim it, you think it's going to be worth 3 cents 15 years from now? Probably not.
It's all based on leverage. If you have a lot of hex now, you have a lot of leverage. If you're small, little turtle, whatever, you don't have that much leverage. You're just trying to play the long game to get to that leverage.
Yeah, and again, not financial advice, but being that it's cheap now, pre fork, it's kind of like a crazy opportunity, right? Again, not with 100% of your bag, but even just to take a little dabble and um, keep on DCAing down, right? I mean, look, I bought as low as 3 cents the first time and as high as 44 cents. And now that I see it this low, again, I bought it like 20 on the way down and maybe like 12. And I stopped by. And I said, okay, I'm gonna see what happens. I'm accumulating some dry powder. Again, this is not 100% of my bag, right? And then when I see it drop below 3, I'm coming back in. And if it drops in the ones, I'm coming back in. And I think because again, there's a lot of people that I know that are all doing the same thing, and there's like a 0% chance that if it does go sub penny, it's there long. Because again, think about it: sub penny at 600 billion hex or 300 billion that are out there to accumulate is really not that much when it goes sub penny. Right? Like guys like Rack and Maestro or the Godwell can buy up all of them if they wanted to.
Hey, it looks like RH is on a live Twitter space. I'm gonna drop off and just listen to it.
Oh, nice. Me too. Thanks, Tiger. Good night, y'all.